Welcome to the 2008 offseason for the 32-team franchise. This is year 6. We'll be starting out with some of the head coaching changes and coaching changes around the league. Starting off with the Oakland Raiders. As you can see, Dick Duran is getting the boot as he went 6-11 his first season and then 4-13 in year 2. 4-13 being the worst record in the league. And the Oakland Raiders decided that they're going to go with a new coach. So Al Davis lets go of Dick Duran and brings in Mike Singletary, the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins had a great year. They've had some good seasons with Steve McNair at quarterback. As you can see, he's been the defensive coordinator for the past 2 seasons under Herm Edwards in Miami, and now he's getting his chance to be a head coach with the Oakland Raiders. Mike Tice is getting the boot as offensive coordinator. The former Vikings head coach joined Oakland with Dick Duran about 2 years ago. And then he's being replaced by Bobby Turner, who is the running backs coach for the Denver Broncos. With Clinton Portis and the fact that they were in the Super Bowl this year, his stock grew, and he ended up getting the promotion to offensive coordinator. Greg Blanche is over there with 2 seasons as Dick Duran's defensive coordinator. He's out, and Steve Spagnuolo from the Arizona Cardinals is getting the defensive coordinator job with Oakland. Next, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this was a 3-year stint for Kevin Gilbride, who is the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. So he was the offensive coordinator when Greg Williams won the Super Bowl, and then he was there for about the next year or two, and then in the 05-06 season had his first start as a head coach, his first head coaching start in my league. He went 7-10 his first year after 2 back-to-back 5-11 seasons by Tom Coughlin, but then every year it got worse. So it went 7-10, 6-11, and this year it was 5-12, and that was just not good enough. So Kevin Gilbride is out, and Wade Phillips, the defensive coordinator for the St. Louis Rams, is in as head coach. Now, a surprising move here with Randall Cunningham moving as the offensive coordinator, replacing Doug Marrone. So this was one of the non-standard coaches in the league, but Randall Cunningham became a coordinator 2 seasons ago as he replaced Jim Zorn as the quarterbacks coach for the Seattle Seahawks, because Jim Zorn ended up being promoted to offensive coordinator in the 06-07 season. And so the former quarterback, Randall Cunningham, came in, had 2 years, did very well working with David Garrard, very well working with Tavares Jackson, and I just felt that he was deserving of being one of the prime candidates for an offensive coordinator job. And so Randall Cunningham calling the plays here in Jacksonville. And then Ted Cottrell gets the boot from being the defensive coordinator, and former head coach Dick Duran gets the job at DC. Again, arguably a good defensive-minded coach, but he didn't do well in Chicago as a head coach and then struggled again in Oakland. So here he is as the defensive coordinator for Jacksonville. Now we'll move to the Tennessee Titans. Now, Jeff Fisher in real life stayed with the Titans for a very long time. However, that was because the Titans had relatively large success with Jeff Fisher. In my reality, he only made the playoffs twice in what was 6 seasons. 2 times in 6 seasons. Had some rough managing of his quarterback. They had Phillip Rivers, and if you were paying attention this season, you'll notice that Rivers was traded at week 4 to the Vikings, kind of like a dismantling of that team. They had 1 good year with Phillip Rivers, and the rest was just mediocre. So unfortunate start to Rivers' career. And due to all that debacle, the Titans needed to make a change. They went 9-7 their first year making the playoffs, went 7-9, 5-11, 11-6, their other playoff berth, then 8-9, 6-11. It just got out of hand. It just got worse, and so they needed a change. That change ends up being Pep Hamilton, the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets. Now, Pep Hamilton stepped in as the offensive coordinator when Mike McCarthy took the head coaching job in 2005-2006 season. Pep Hamilton, I wasn't expecting to be a rising star head coach candidate, but this past season and these last 2 seasons with the Jets, or 3 seasons with the Jets, they were 8-9, 8-9, 11-6 with Alex Smith at quarterback. I felt Pep Hamilton did a great job there, so I thought, okay, let's give him the opportunity. So he was a high-profile coaching candidate, got the job. He then brings Kevin Gilbride as his offensive coordinator, taking a step back from head coach after being fired, landing in Tennessee. Mike Hermedinger is no longer with them. And then Ray Rhodes, who's kind of bounced around the league as a coordinator. I'm trying to remember where he got his start. But he bounced around as a position coach with the Jets, I believe it was. Yes, he was the linebackers coach for 2 years with the Jets. Then he got the defensive coordinator job with the Titans. But then he is being replaced by Romeo Crennel, who, spoiler alert, is also getting fired this season. And we'll talk about the Cardinals coaching changes coming up. But Romeo Crennel comes in, gets kind of a 3-4 type scheme there for the Tennessee Titans. As we move to the Buffalo Bills. So this was the Super Bowl winning Greg Williams. Now, why would I get rid of him? Well, the first season they went 10-6 and won the Super Bowl. The next 3 years after that, they were 9-7, 11-5, 10-7, very successful with their team. But I decided that I was going to try to make a move for a younger quarterback. So they made the big trade, getting rid of Drew Bledsoe, who was their prime guy, and they went for Matt Leinart, giving up a first-round pick the following year. And since then, they were 6-11, 6-11. But also, if you've ever researched Greg Williams, he's the type of person that has had a lot of conflict when he's been coaching. Players tend not to like him. So I figured, okay, let's have some locker room struggles here these past 2 years. And it got so much to the point where Steve Fairchild Tom Donahue or whatever is the general manager of the Buffalo Bills, and decided that a change was needed. So Greg Williams is out, but the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, Mike Munchak, gets his starting job. He was one of the prime head coaches around this time, because again, I think he was on track for the Titans job in real life. But here he worked his way up with the Vikings. Let me double check here. I believe, yes, he got his OC job back in 2005 with Norv Turner. Was there for 3 years. Vikings were 10-7, 10-7, 12-5. Culpepper was MVP for 2 of those seasons. You know, it just had such great success with the Vikings. He was a ideal head coaching replacement. Then Doug Marrone replaces Scott Linehan for the offensive coordinator position. So Doug Marrone goes from Jacksonville OC to the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. Then Jerry Gray, who actually was a considered head coaching candidate a few seasons ago, ends up getting knocked out for a Mike Smith, who was, I believe, the linebackers coach for the Baltimore Ravens for multiple seasons. And he has now moved up to being a defensive coordinator. Probably will be a potential future head coach if he does well. Next, as you saw before, Crennel is now the new Tennessee Titans DC because he was fired from his job with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Crennel also did not have many seasons, but this was a year where he had some of the most talented players on this team. In his 3rd season as head coach, his first year he went 8-9 with Michael Vick, kind of being injured, not injured. It was Trent Green and Michael Vick. Then he lost Michael Vick, I believe. He might have had Michael Vick for that year. It was 5-12, his 06-07 season. This being his first season without Michael Vick, he went 7-10. But he had Brett Favre. He had Calvin Johnson Jr. He had Andre Johnson. He had Tony Gonzalez, Ricky Williams, and so many more good players that they should have been the a playoff team, let alone probably the best team in the league, and they failed to do so. And so in his 3-year tenure as the Arizona Cardinals coach, he probably would have gotten another year if his team wasn't so stacked and their expectations weren't so high. So Romeo Crennel's out, and Ken Whisenhunt, the offensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, gets his head coaching job chance. And he was the actual head coach of the Arizona Cardinals around this time. With winning the Super Bowl with Tom Coughlin, I felt he was a very high priority of a head coach. And so there he is taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Ollie Wilson was a weak choice for offensive coordinator, but the reason he was hired back with Romeo Crennel was because Michael Vick ended up being the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. So I felt that, okay, the quarterback coach for the Falcons gets the promotion to offensive coordinator. Crennel brings a fan or a favorite of Michael Vick, a coach he's worked with. But he is getting replaced by Livonia Mitchell, or Stump Mitchell, who is the running backs coach for the Seattle Seahawks. So good work there with Sean Alexander, and he is now getting his job to be the offensive coordinator. And then Steve Spagnuolo was fired from the Arizona Cardinals, right? So they ended up bringing Bill Bradley. So some of that kind of an unlikely option here. I mean, when I was looking through some of the potential coordinators or position coach that could be hired, he's been the defensive backs coach for the San Diego Chargers the last 3 seasons when they went 11-6, 9-8, 13-4. Arguably saying that he had some influence in that, and so he ends up getting the defensive coordinator job for the Arizona Cardinals, while Steve Spagnuolo goes to Oakland. Now, a few other position coaches that are being replaced. So again, Mike Munchak leaves Minnesota and gets replaced by Rich Olson. He was the former, I believe, the Arizona Cardinals coordinator a while ago. I can double check that here as I'm looking through. Excuse some of my pauses here. I'm just getting the video out and about. But yes, he was the offensive coordinator for the first 3 seasons with the Arizona Cardinals, going 4-12, 9-7, 7-9 with Dave McGinnis. He went to be a a position coach somewhere, and then he got another shot here with Minnesota. Whisenhunt, getting the Cardinals job, is now replaced by Terry Shea, who is the quarterbacks coach for the Indianapolis Colts. So Terry Shea getting his job to start calling plays after working with Peyton Manning for several years. Then we have Pep Hamilton being replaced by Art Shell. So as Pep Hamilton goes to Tennessee, Art Shell, I believed in real life he was the Oakland Raiders head coach for a season. I forget where I had Art Shell beforehand. I forget if he was let's see. Let me double check here. I'll look him up. So Art Shell, let's find him, was the offensive lineman coach for the San Diego Chargers the last 3 seasons. So again, with their big push being the number 1 team in the league, 13-4, protecting Rodgers, rush blocking for LaDainian Tomlinson, Ron Dane. What ended up happening here was he ended up getting that next boost up to being a coordinator. Then some other position coach changes. We see the offensive coordinator, Jim McNally, getting fired from Chicago. So instead of Johnny Lynn, the head coach, getting fired, which he was on the hot seat after taking over a team by Dick Duran that was a high-caliber playoff team, the Bears have not done too well these past 2 seasons, going only 8-9 and then the 6-11 with Johnny Lynn. They had Brady Quinn this year and Kerry Collins kind of trading starting roles. But he is replaced by Bill Callahan, who is one of the position coaches with the San Francisco 49ers. And again, he was the Oakland Raiders head coach, one of the best offensive lineman coaches in the league. And so he's getting the offensive coordinator job there with Chicago. Adam Gase, I prematurely put him at a coordinator job. He shouldn't have been that fast there. But the Rams have had some challenges. And so again, We look at Gase getting fired and then being replaced by Rob Chudzinski, who was the Arizona Cardinals tight ends coach. And so Rob Chudzinski, he did make it his start with the Cleveland Browns as a head coach many years later, but wanted to get him a coordinator position job, especially working with Tony Gonzalez on a team that underperformed under Romeo Crennel, but then gets a chance to be calling the plays with the Rams. Then when Wade Phillips was heading off to Jacksonville, Jeff Fisher, the former Titans head coach, becomes the defensive coordinator with the St. Louis Rams. Mike Martz continues to be the coach there. And when you look at Mike Martz's success, he's been 11-5, a playoff team his first season, 7-9, then 11-5, NFC Championship game, getting to the Super Bowl but losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then next season 10-7, going to the playoffs, 9-7-1 the year before, and then last year 9-8. He's always had a above 500 record except for that 03-04 year. So Mike Martz keeps his job, but he loses Wade Phillips to a head coaching gig, and he gets rid of Adam Gase, who's just grossly incompetent. Then the Browns fire Mike Trigovac, who was a position coach with the Carolina Panthers. And the only reason he got the DC job in Cleveland was because Mangini was the defensive coordinator for the Panthers, getting his job in Cleveland. So he is let go and replaced by the defensive backs coach Mel Tucker. And so Mel Tucker gets his job at DC, gets promoted from within. The Colts fire Bo Pelini. So even though the Colts made it to the AFC Championship game, they were only 7-10 this year. Tom Moore, who was the offensive coordinator, did a good job with the Indianapolis Colts. So the Colts' offense was number 1 in the league last year in total offensive yards. They were number 1 in passing yards, but they were 32nd in rushing yards. But we'll be quiet about that. They lost Edgar and James. What are you going to do about it? But when you look at their defense, they were 32nd ranked defense. They were in total defensive yards allowed. They were 32nd in pass yards allowed, and they were 23rd in rushing yards allowed. So arguably, something had to give. So Tony Dungy is probably in his last season as a head coach, keeps Tom Moore, fires Bo Pelini, but then brings on Greg Williams, the former head coach of the Bills. And so Greg Williams is hopefully going to bring that toughness to the Indianapolis Colts defense that they desperately need. And then the defensive coordinator, Mike Singletary, going off to coach the Oakland Raiders, is now being replaced by Mark Duffner. I believe he was another Cardinal person. Let me double check where he floated around. Oh, no, sorry. He was with the Minnesota Vikings. That's right. So the Vikings linebackers coach the last 2 seasons, as he was formerly with the Cincinnati Bengals. So when they went 3-13, he was their defensive coordinator. Then he took some time off because he just wasn't that good. Ended up going to Minnesota as a linebacker coach for 2 years, and then getting his next chance at DC with the Miami Dolphins. Lastly, someone I just want to get rid of. I didn't have a good headshot for him. So Steve Sidwell, I'm saying he got a coaching job in the NCAA. We just wanted to get rid of him in Seattle. And so Rod Marinelli, the former defensive backs coach for the San Francisco 49ers, gets to be the defensive coordinator for the divisional opponent, the Seattle Seahawks. So that is the long, deep dive into the coaching changes heading into the 2008-2009 season. And when I do this, I do try to change the scheme of the team. I also tend to be more inclined to make more drastic roster decisions based off of the new head coach, right? They're going to likely want their quarterback unless the quarterback there is solid, or they might bring someone in to challenge the current running back or whoever. And I'm going to try to find ways to bring players from that older team onto this new team because of the past relationships that they've had. So I hope you enjoyed this first video of the offseason where we talk about our head coach changes and defensive and offensive coordinators. I do have a whole list of all the different positional coaches. If you're interested in that, just let me know in the comments, and maybe I can have a deeper dive into our coaching trees and our coaching rosters in this fantasy. But next we'll have some other offseason videos with retirements, free agent signings, trades, and the draft.